Okay. All right. So we each have a copy of the observation form that I filled out when I was observing your lab on Friday.
All right.
So some of the positives that I saw is the students were very helpful. They were, trying to tell you who was absent so that way you could verify and make sure you knew exactly who was there. At the beginning of the class, you directed students to the area of the classroom where they were supposed to turn their work in. And you highlighted that it needed to be their own work, and even as they were turning it in, that was really important. And then you used the smart board to go over the lab instructions, and you highlighted some of those keywords like dichotomous key, and you reminded them about what they'd learned previously and how that fit in with the owl pellets. And then you had on the board, you displayed some of the bone charts so that way they knew what they were looking for. And then you kind of scrolled through the lab paper and you highlighted the things that they needed to work on. Each student needs to have this part filled out, and then there was even an extra credit opportunity in there. The instructions were very clear. It seemed like the kids, they quickly got into their groups, which was impressive because sometimes it's kind of like, oh, who's gonna be my friend today?
They're pretty self-sustaining there.
Yeah. But they worked well together. Most of the kids seemed to jump right into it. The only ones I saw that were kind of like, these are gloves. Look at these gloves. Were the two up front here.
Yeah.
Patricia and
Michael.
Yeah. So those two were a little slow to get going, but they weren't like being malicious. They weren't messing with other groups. They were just kind of like, look at this glove.
Yeah. And a little bit extra encouragement.
Yeah. But then you circulated around the class well, you passed up the materials, you were constantly monitoring, asking questions. The noise level was high, but we expect that with the lab.
Yeah.
They were talking to each other. They weren't like yelling across the classroom. So they were having interesting conversations like, ew, what is this? What do you think that is? And then a couple times I did hear them say, at one partner would ask a question like, what are we supposed to do? The other person would say, well, he said you're supposed to do this. So at least half of the groups, they were able to pare it back what exactly was supposed to happen. So they seemed like they knew what they were supposed to do. They seemed like they were on task. They asked you questions if they got stuck. It seemed like everyone just kind of knew what they were up to, so that was good. Under Standard 1, for engaging and supporting all students, you let the students do their own groupings, and as I was looking at our IEP kids, they seemed to pick general education students. So they paired up with students who might have different strengths than they have, and so that was kind of impressive that they just kind of knew who to gravitate to help them kind of do well. Real life context, so you've been learning about food webs and ecosystems, so this was kind of a nice culmination to that. And then it definitely goes well with what SJVA's learning style is, with inquiry-based. I heard a lot of questions as they were going through, so that was all cool there. For standard number 2, maintaining an effective environment, you have the cell phone basket as students come in. They had whatever materials they needed in their hand. They left their backpacks outside. You went over the lab instructions. They knew what they needed to do. It was very clear. The lab instructions seemed clear as well. And then when it came time to clean up, they cleaned up and they saved their work. And so that seemed to go really well as well. For standard 3, when we talked in our pre-conference or pre-observation conference, you showed me where you guys were at in the pacing guide, and that's to make sure you get all those topics in. And I know that you're bilingual, which definitely helps with those students who are, emerging in their acquisition there. And then I did talk about the IEP students here and how they chose to be paired with general education students. And because of the nature of the activity, there was a lot of ability for it to be differentiated, but it seemed like most of the kids knew it was on task and it didn't have to be modified to any level. For standard 4, so sequential instruction, it fit in nicely with all the different topics that you've learned about recently. Then for standard 5, you definitely were monitoring the students the entire class period. You were available to them as questions came up, and then you gave instructions as needed, and you were able to get the whole class's attention if it was like an overarching, everyone's probably having this kind of a question. And then developing as a professional educator for standard 6. Any of the students that didn't finish the homework that was due today, you let them know that your expectation was for them to come in after school and get help on it, because if they weren't understanding the concepts and they need that additional time. And then you're also available to students at lunch and after school, and even up through extended enrichment. And then you're also able to give out your tickets for bathroom passes, so that way you can make sure that you're minimizing the amount of time that students are missing class.
Having an immediate effect also.
Oh, that's awesome.
They stopped asking so quick.
Really?
So nice.
That's cool. Yeah, what a difference it can make. So the strengths that I saw, the student interest was high. You monitored their progress. The lab was done at the student's pace, but the expectations were clear. The instructions were given through the lab paper, but you overviewed them at the beginning of class. The students were able to interact in their lab groups, and they were on tasks, and there weren't any discipline issues during that class period. And it does seem like the students appear to enjoy the labs, and they're engaged by them. And then it was a great idea to keep those kids after class or after school to make sure that they're getting the help that they need. Other observations, you're professional with the students, you encourage mutual respect in the classroom, you do provide opportunities for them to get additional help, you want them to be successful, and you have a good rapport with the students. Do you have any questions for me?
No, pretty. Like the lab, it's just, I need to make sure I remember to order it earlier next year, so it's directly after the unit rather than a week after the unit.
Okay,
Or we
sounds
do.
good.
But other than that, no,
All right.
it's easy.
All right, you have the good work.
You're welcome.